Hello, BookTube. I have an early morning mail haul for you here. My surly houseboy found some packages of mail on the front porch late last night. They had been soaked all evening, so I don't know what shape they're going to be in. Uh, uh, there's only 4 of them. There are no boxes. There was anything really to protect them. The UPS driver did. The Saturday UPS driver isn't my usual UPS driver. He doesn't show up at the same time, and he doesn't have the courtesy to ring the bell. I don't think it's part of his routine. So I didn't know they were out there, so these things might not be usable anymore. They might be totally destroyed, but worth a while to take a look at them and see. Okay, so this first one is a thriller from Thomas and Mercer, who are the thriller imprint of Amazon Publishing. Done a lot of books that I really like. This comes out in February. Do we have a date? An actual date for this? The beginning of February, the first Tuesday of February. This is Robert Dugoni. This is A Cold Trail. Don't tell me this is going to be another paperback original. It is. Good Lord. Yeah, this is another paperback original. That is becoming a trend. Same with literature and translation. Great. They're great. If new releases can become more affordable, new releases will sell better. I don't know why publishers have needed this long to figure that out, but nevertheless, they should follow the UK rule, or at least what my version of the UK rule. When you have a new release, you bring it out in paperback, in a sturdy, attractive trade paperback for $15, $16, and not much more than that ever. And you bring out a tiny amount of hardcovers, not just for libraries, but also for people who want hardcovers, who can order that. But you assume that the reading public wants a $15 paperback. You would sell out those paperback print runs. And the end result, your authors would probably dislike taking a smaller cut up front, and their agents and all of the people at the house would probably dislike taking a smaller cut up front, but they will make more money in the long run. But anyway, in order for that to really be brought home, you would have to dismantle the obscene returns policy in the American publishing industry, and I don't see that going anywhere anytime soon, even though it's absolutely insane. But anyway, how about the book? Let's see here. This is the next book in the Tracy Crosswhite series. And this time the Seattle homicide detective confronts not only a brutal murder, but also her own haunted past. Sorry for the wobbling. Frida is going crazy. Tracy Crosswhite fled Cedar Grove after the trial of her sister's murder and her father's subsequent suicide. But now she's back in the hopes of starting over with her husband, Dan, an attorney, and their baby daughter. I'm assuming that Dan is an attorney and that she's not starting over with 2 people and a baby daughter. Well, that would be interesting, wouldn't it? But it isn't long before she's drawn into another case, the murder of a local reporter and a police officer's wife, who is killed while investigating the cold case of a young woman with a dark secret. When Tracy realizes that the wrong person has been charged in the cold case, she tries to find the real killer and ends up in a house of mirrors that may cost her her own life. Okay, so a standard-sounding thriller. I think I read a Robert Dugoni. I think we saw his last one on this channel. I think I read it, and I think I remember liking it. I believe it was a Crosswhite mystery. Okay, so this comes out in early February. I'm getting a lot of thrillers this year, and also a lot of paperback originals. Very pleased with both of those. And this is also completely dry. So, well, I hope. I hope that all the rest of these are completely dry. That would be great. Let's see what we have next here. Oh my. This next one's not only dry, but hot. Oh, goodness. Okay, this is going to be a mass market paperback, but this is a trade advance copy of a romance. And I have mentioned in the past, especially when I'm alluding to my sister from another mister, my BookTube spirit animal, Sarah at Steeped in Books, whose channel, if you don't watch her channel, you must. And if you take a look at it and you realize, okay, this is a channel almost entirely about romance novels, and I'm not interested in romance novels, I don't read romance novels, try it anyway and see. You don't have to read as must surely be one of the guiding rules of this little corner of booktubes that we have created. You don't have to be interested in the books to watch the person's video. It's the person you're watching for. But anyway, she and I have bantered back and forth in the comments field, and I have brought up on this channel that there are some protected species of hunks in the romance world. There are cowboys. Used to be that there were cowboys in the Old West. That has largely gone by the wayside because there's no politically correct way to write an Old West romance. Once upon a time, one of the protected species of hunks was the brawny Comanche warrior in a loincloth and nothing else. Nobody can write those books anymore. Talk about what the 20th century, the 21st century loathsomely refers to as cultural appropriation. Nobody can do that anymore. But cowboys still exist in romances, only they're usually contemporary. They're rodeo riders or something like that. They're the last ranchers out in the West who are on private land that their families owned for generations. And another, of course, is the Regency rake, who must be reformed. And another protected species in the romance paddock is the Highlander. We've seen many examples of it. I probably have one right to hand. We've seen many examples of the... Okay, well, the one Highlander that I have right to hand, I was going to mention kilts, but this one's not wearing one. But they're another protected species, and that I guess they have some sort of inherent romantic allure. I've never seen it myself. But this new romance, which comes out in late February, blends two of those. It is a contemporary Highlander novel. It's by Laura Trentham, and it's called A Highlander in a Pickup. He's wearing plaid, but it's covering his brawny chest instead of his oak-like legs. And Laura Trentham, doesn't that name ring a bell? Didn't we get a romance from her just the other day? Maybe not. Maybe it's a different name. Anyway, what have we got here? Highland, Georgia. That's the name of the town. Highland, Georgia will never be the same after award-winning author Laura Trentham's second book in the Highland, Georgia romance series. The rules of love will change directions when a gorgeous new man in a kilt comes to town and shakes everything up at the Highland Festival. Ian Connors is the poster boy for the strong, silent type. Just like me. Growing up a loner in Cairndow Castle in Scotland with only the cliffs and moors for company, it's understood Ian will assume the mantle of Cairndow of the Cairndow groundskeeper when his father is ready to relinquish it. Oh, so he's grown up in the castle, but he's the son of the groundskeeper. Okay. But his stint in Her Majesty's Armed Forces has opened up a whole new world, and now, rather than settle down, he accepts an invitation to travel to the States to take charge of the Highland Games. After all, he's led men into battle. How hard can planning a party be? Anna Maitland is ready to step up for her best friend Isabel Blackmore, who can't run the games in their hometown this year. Surely Anna, a dance instructor with boundless energy, spirit, and charm, is up for the challenge. What she doesn't anticipate is a man in a kilt who turns up claiming he's the one in charge. What's worse about this Ian? He's so infuriatingly handsome that she can't help but fantasize about him whispering sweet nothings in her ear in his rumbly, sexy brogue. Like, in booktube terms, that would be, picture Graham Quigley, only a Graham Quigley who had ever in his life done even one push-up. I know it's a stretch, but that's roughly what you get with a rumbly Scottish brogue. Okay, so this... And I wonder why I have no friends on BookTube. I've heard that referred to as my penchant for pigtail pulling. But anyway, the previous book in this series, this is a Highland, Georgia novel, and the previous book in this series was A Highlander Walks into a Bar. And I seem to remember getting that and reading it and liking it, but I have a feeling I'm going to like this book anyway, predecessors notwithstanding. And it's always kind of weird. I admit, it's kind of weird to get mass market romance in a trade paperback, but I'm all for it. This sounds like so much fun. All right, so that's two. So we have a thriller and a romance. So if we're talking about Steve favorites, then maybe next we could get a work of history. And then maybe a work of biography. Works of biography have been very thin on the ground in the mail so far. I would like that to change. So let's see what this next one is. Well, okay. This is not a work of history, and it is not a work of biography, but boy, oh boy, does it continue a trend. This is definitely a trend. I know it's early to call that in January, but what else can you say? This is another work in translation. We get one literally in every mail haul, or more than one. That's astonishing. Okay, so this is another work in translation, and this one is big. Not literally big, but this is going to be reviewed everywhere. It's going to be talked about everywhere. It's going to be stacked by the dozens in the new release section of your bookstore. It's going to be mentioned in dispatches. This is a big deal. This is the world's most famous translating team and an author who needs no introduction. This is 42 stories by Anton Chekhov, translated by Peviarin Volkonsky. That's huge. So this comes out in April. This will not be a paperback original, I'm sure. No, this will be for the $35 hardcover. Every library in the country will order a copy of this book. Schools will assign it. Professors who have courses in Russian literature and English will dump their old Chekhov and get this instead. And it will get, a 3-page write-up in the New York Review of Books, a 4-page write-up in the London Review of Books. It'll get a half-page in the TLS. It will get its own standalone review in the New York Times Book Review, and so on and so forth. Just because Peviarin and Volkonsky are famous translators who've done almost everything. I have a select list of things I wish they would do, Russian works I wish they would do, that they don't appear to have any inclination to get around to. And I think that's probably commercial. Because the list of Russian works that I really want them to get around to are almost all in the Iron Curtain Soviet era. The absurdist, subversive, incredible work that was done in that period by men and women who were risking their lives to do it. And some of that work is dark and hysterically funny. I would love to see these two give some of that stuff a huge boost. That whole period is almost unknown to the West. But a new volume of Chekhov I will absolutely take, because in addition to being a great short story artist, one of the archetypal short story writers, him and Guy de Maupassant and a couple of others, he was also, of course, one of the legendary USS Enterprise bridge crew. Let's see here. Anton Chekhov's genius left an indelible impact on every literary form in which he wrote, but none more so than short fiction. Now, renowned translators Peviarin and Volkonsky give us their peerless renderings of 52 Chekhov stories. These stories, which span the complete arc of his career, reveal the extraordinary variety and unexpectedness of his work, from the farcically comic to the darkly complex, showing that there is no single type of Chekhov story. They are populated by a remarkable range of characters who come from all parts of Russia and all walks of life. Okay, well, these two wrote, they have translated so much, and of course they became obscenely, independently wealthy when their translation of Anna Karenina was an Oprah pick. So that, and promptly went from selling 660,000 copies to 2.7 million copies or something like that, easy. So this will be a big deal. And it is the highest, so far, the highest profile work in translation that we've got so far this year. But it's only January, and we've received 30, 40 works in translation. So that's incredible. All right, so we're hitting the archetypal things here. We have a thriller, always happy for a thriller. We have a romance, always happy for a romance. We have a work in translation. I've been getting tons of those. What will this last one be? Will it continue a trend, or will it be something new? Let's see. Oh, it's a work of history. Okay, so this was a waterlogged mail haul, although the books weren't touched at all. They sat out there in the soaking wet. The books weren't touched at all. Oh, fantastic. Okay, this is a February release. This is a finished copy. I don't remember if we ever got an advance copy of this, but this is a work of history. This is by Ellen Carroll Dubois, and this is Suffrage, Women's Long Battle for the Vote. This comes out in late February. It has blurbs from Publishers Weekly, Vivian Gornick, and Gloria Steinem. Okay, let's see here. The year 2020 marks the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment to the Constitution, which granted women the right to vote. The majority of the Republicans in the United States Senate right now would like to repeal that amendment. The majority of Republican-ruled legislatures in states all across the country would like to repeal that amendment. It's not hyperbole. They're not joking. And they're the majority. They sometimes come very close in private conferences and in private polling to being able to do it. They would like to repeal that amendment. As Twitter pedants like to say, let that sink in. Anyway, in this book explores the full scope of the dramatic and inspiring suffrage movement, which brought half the American population into the voting body, giving them fundamental political rights and recognizing their existence as individuals beyond the scope of family roles. The author is a distinguished research professor at UCLA, and in this book she takes us through the very heart of American history with vivid portraits of the suffrage movement's bold leaders and devoted activists. She begins in the pre-Civil War years with four mothers: Lucretia Mott, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Susan B. Anthony, and Sojourner Truth, and explores the links between the suffrage movement and the abolition of slavery. Carrie Chapman Catt and Alice Paul brought the fight into the 20th century, and African-American women, led by Ida B. Wells Barnett, we'll be getting to her in the Penguin crawl that we're doing, demanded voting rights even as white suffragists ignored them. The author explains how, after decades of persevering through disappointment and defeat, suffragists forged a strategy to win voting rights in crucial battleground states, culminating in the last most difficult ratification in Tennessee. I cannot stress enough, I'm not going to make this a polemic, I promise, but I cannot stress enough the danger of viewing this as a settled matter of law. I cannot stress that enough. In the next 2 years, Roe v. Wade is going to be overturned in this country. And women in this country who find themselves pregnant and want an abortion will be sent to jail if they try to have one. It will be illegal for them to have an abortion in any state in this country. And hard on the heels of that kind of seismic change will be the repeal of the 19th Amendment. You can say, you're just nuts, or, Trump derangement syndrome or anything like this. It has nothing to do with Trump. Trump is not a Republican. This has to do with an extremely evangelical, paleo-Republican, Tea Party-inspired insurgency in the political party that is largely in control and that views women in strictly biblical terms. In other words, what was that phrase? The scope of family roles. And only that. I know you don't believe me. That's all right. That's okay. I'm certainly hoping that I'm wrong. The key to stopping anything like that from happening is for women to vote in their own best interests and to outvote men. They could easily do that. If women voted as if their lives and livelihoods depended on it, there'd never be another man elected to any elected office anywhere in the country. And there'd be no more wars, and there'd be a responsible economic government. That's for sure. There are, as an old friend of mine used to say, an old friend of mine who was, let's say, intimately involved in the suffrage movement and in women's rights, she used to say, there are dangers inherent in allowing to the reins of government a section of the population whose bodies are perpetually inundated with testosterone. That's entirely true. But I hope I'm wrong. The easiest remedy would be if all women vote. Not only vote, but canvass amongst themselves. Go out and raise the women's vote everywhere where you live. Put women in office. That's the way to do it, is to put women in office, and then none of this will happen. And that Paleolithic, extremely millenarian movement within the Republican Party would just be squashed. But anyway, this little book is going out to a poor, sickly sufferer out in the the Western Territories somewhere. As we say here in Boston, anything west of Worcester doesn't count. But I have a poor, sickly reviewer, surrounded by well-meaning little dogs, who will be taking this book. And if she has to write a really good review on her deathbed, well, that's what I'll crack the whip for her to do. So there you go. So we have almost every box that could be ticked. There are no giant killer sharks here, but otherwise, we have a work of history on a fascinating subject. There was a book a couple of years ago called The Woman's Hour on the same subject. Had a much better cover, but it was on the same subject: the fight for the amendment, the fight for the right for half the population to vote. The Woman's Hour was incredible. It was absolutely fantastic. I haven't read this, so I have no idea how it measures up. Then we have 52 short stories by Anton Chekhov, by Peviar and Volkonsky, the A-list of the translating world, and therefore the combination guaranteed to get notice everywhere. I don't know. I say it's bound to be reviewed everywhere. That, of course, brings up the question of whether or not I'm going to review it. I don't know that. I mean, I know it's Chekhov, and I know he's brilliant, and I know that they are noteworthy as a translating duo, but I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I'll decide. I have time. A little time. Then Highlander in a Pickup, the second in the Highland, Georgia series, after Highlander walks into a bar. And finally, A Cold Trail, a paperback original, much like Highlander in a Pickup, a thriller. I think the second or the third in the series. Maybe Highlander in a Pickup is the second in the series. A Cold Trail may be 3 or 4. But that's, I've got a thriller, I've got a romance, I've got canonical new work of literature and translation, and a history. So I'm happy. And not only is it a history, but in this particular case, as an added bonus, it's a history that's going to kick Woodrow Wilson in the teeth, which always suits Steve right down to the ground. Anyway, so there you go. I expected the worst. I expected we would open these things and I would find pages stuck together and mold growing everywhere, but no, the packages protected them from a rainy, soggy start to the day. But that's all over with. These were out at the very worst time and they survived, so I need not have worried. But I'm going to wrap this up for now and wait a few hours before I make another video. So I will see you then. Thank you, BookTube.